Right now, right now. 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 Oh, I got a real good feeling.
We try to bring you high-quality educational and informational content every single day. Why do you think the price is having such an anemic time? The news story of the hour. Jump onto the chart. Is this the beginning of a massive financial unraveling? We've got to add a little addendum to the show map today. So we start here on the daily. Now, we've been looking at the RSI on Bitcoin's daily chart for the last several days. They always have been, but it's been increasing over the last 50 years since it was out. The government has been Hey guys, what's going on? Jebb here, and welcome back to Coffee and Crypto Live. This is your weekdaily morning show where we bring you the latest in Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, financial, geopolitical, technical, on-chain, and fundamental analysis. And in today's episode, there has been an open letter. Whew. You got to be really careful when you get an open letter. You know, you're either going to get some mad liberal arts teacher sending a letter to all the students, or it's Cameron Winklevoss coming at Barry Silbert again over at DCG, and that's exactly what he's done. Just about an hour ago, Cameron Winklevoss fired another shot across the bow at Barry Silbert, and this time he called on the board of directors at Digital Currency Group to remove Barry Silbert as the chief executive officer and accused him of fraud. We're going to be taking a look at this open letter. It's about twice as long as the last one that was sent out in the earlier part of January, and it's juicy. Ooh, man. Some really, really big allegations going on there, and definitely some cause for concern about the stability of Genesis Trading Capital, Genesis Global Trading and Genesis Global Capital, those being subsidiaries of DCG Digital Currency Group, led by Barry Silbert. Could this be the beginning of the end of DCG, and what would that mean for the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency market? That's what we're going to find out today. But this is Coffee and Crypto Live. I normally don't drink coffee anymore, but I've been weaning myself off. But I do have a Gatorade this morning, so cheers. Make sure you're staying hydrated. It's a very important thing. We've been learning a lot about the importance of staying hydrated recently, and we're going to jump right into it. Let's go ahead and read some chat. Crypto Nebs 83 was the first one in chat. Said, morning all, smash the likes for Jebb's thoughts on Lux Algo wave turning red to blue. We can take a look at Lux Algo here in a little bit. Howdy for the cowboy hat, by the way. Thank you very much. It is in the other part of the office. I don't have it right now, or I'd show you. I did get a cowboy hat for Christmas, so I really do appreciate that from my wife. It's a Henschel. If you don't know, Henschel is an incredible company when it comes to hats. You can watch the video I uploaded yesterday where we talk about potentially going into preterm labor. I was wearing the hat there. You can see it. All right, we also got Crypto Mini Bike in chat. Justin Eubanks in chat. CBD Sunny. Suddy, not Sunny. Suddy in chat. We got Mike Lowry in chat. Said, good morning, my coffee and crypto family. Hashtag FinSol. I'm going to run through the green names really quickly so that we can jump into this story. I want to jump straight into reading what Cameron Winklevoss has to say here. It's 3 pages. It's going to take me probably 10 minutes to read through it, but I want to just kind of break it down for you. Like I said, if you're new here, green names, we read them every single morning. You can hit that join button down below to join the Jebb Nights, and I will read your green name at the beginning of every single live stream. Dang, I could have at least been third earliest to chat, lol, said wisely. Again, we got Justin Eubanks in chat, Mike Lowry, Sean Frost. Hello, Sean Frost. We've got Crypto Mini Bike, the Classic IT Guy, CBD Suddy, and Matt C. All right, so we're going to jump straight into this letter. If we have time towards the end of the stream, we're going to take a look at the geopolitical macro environment. I want to catch you up to speed a little bit what's going on with the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and some of the military hardware developments that have taken place in that field. Again, one of the things that I like to share with you guys on this stream is not just cryptocurrency, because while we talk mainly about cryptocurrency, that is not our only topic. We're also going to talk about geopolitics. We're also going to talk about financial markets. I'm thinking about doing a video on Tesla pretty soon. Drop a 1 in chat if you'd be interested in that. And I also want to make sure you guys have an understanding of the entire macro market, because it's so easy to get zoomed in just on Bitcoin, and then you don't know what's going on in the rest of the world, and you don't understand the broader landscape of things. I don't want us to become ideologues where we're only watching the crypto markets and not paying attention to the rest of the world, because there is so much out there that we can, 1, profit in, but 2, also that we need to know, not only for our cryptocurrency investments, but also just for our lives. We need to know what's going on. All right. let's go ahead and jump onto the chart. I guess it's not the chart. Instead, it'd be Twitter. Just so happened to check Cameron Winklevoss's Twitter today to see if he had sent out another open letter to none other than Barry Silbert at DCG, and I found that he had. This is why Twitter is such an awesome thing. He sent his first open letter here to Barry Silbert. We'll kind of run down it really briefly. This was sent on January the 2nd. If you don't remember, essentially Genesis, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Digital Currency Group, is owed $1.67 billion by... it is owed $1.675 billion from Digital Currency Group, of which Barry Silbert is the founder and CEO. $1.1 billion of that is in the form of a $1.1 billion promissory note to cover a hole in Genesis's accounting, where they loaned money very stupidly to Three Arrows Capital, and then Three Arrows Capital went bankrupt. You're going to hear a lot more about them here in just a little while. Now, Genesis also owes Gemini $900 million, and those $900 million are owed to the different users of the Gemini Earn program, which Cameron Winklevoss said on January the 2nd totaled 340,000 users who want to know where their money is because they can't get it back out of Genesis. This is a house of cards. And the problem is Genesis could have probably continued on with its nonsense that it was being told to do by Barry Silbert, if not for the fact that they had lost $175 million that was locked up in FTX. Contagion is continuing to spread. You can see this first tweet got 9.5 million views. This next tweet came out an hour ago. In fact, it dropped at 8:40 a.m., so it dropped an hour and 27 minutes ago. This is a bombshell. Earn update, an open letter to the board of at DCG Co. That being DCG and their board of directors. If you don't know, DCG is one of the largest companies in the cryptocurrency space. Crypto company. Let's see if I can find their wiki, their Wikipedia, because I believe they have one. You can see they were founded in 2015. They were founded by Barry Silbert. They're headquartered in Stamford, Connecticut. They have $50 billion in assets under management. And the thing I want you to pay attention to here is this. They own CoinDesk, which I'm sure you've heard of, Foundry, which you may not have heard of, Genesis Global Capital, which owns Genesis Global Trading, DCG owns GGC, which owns GGT. You can also see that Genesis Global Trading is a cryptocurrency platform, and they also own Grayscale. Grayscale was founded in 2013. They were bought by DCG, and Grayscale is the creator and the holder of the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. Lot of stories to cover on all of those things. This is a massive company with thousands of employees, and it is most certainly one of, if not one of the... It is most certainly one of, if not the largest and most powerful companies in the entire cryptocurrency realm. And Cameron Winklevoss has a bone to pick with their founder. Let's go ahead and read through this. Like I said, I'm going to read through the whole thing. This is approximately 3 pages long, but like I said, this is actually it's 4 pages long. Apologies. I read it all this morning before we went live. This is shocking if everything that's said here is true. All right, I'm going to try and go through this quickly, but also make sure that we pay attention to everything. The liquidators are on to you, Barry. Got to watch out for that guy. Got to watch out for Mr. Speedo dude over here. He might be coming for the Bitcoin. Anyway, an open letter to the board of Digital Currency Group. I'm writing to let you know that Gemini and more than 340,000 earned users have been defrauded by Genesis Global Capital LLC, together with its parent company Digital Currency Group, DCG, its founder and CEO Barry Silbert, and other key personnel. First sentence, accusations of criminal fraud. I say criminal, of course fraud is typically criminal. These parties conspired to make false statements and misrepresentations to Gemini, earned users, and other lenders, and the public at large about the solvency and financial health at Genesis. And as we're going to see, if these accusations that we're about to read are true, then that statement is certainly an accurate representation of what took place. Give me just 1 second here. Let's see. I want to make sure I have chat here on screen. There we go. These parties conspired to make false statements and misrepresentations to Gemini, earned users, other lenders, and the public at large about the solvency and financial health of Genesis. They did so in an effort to mislead lenders into believing that DCG had absorbed massive loans that Genesis incurred from the Three Arrows Capital Ltd. 3AC collapse and induced lenders to continue making loans to Genesis. By lying, they hoped to buy time to dig themselves out of the hole they created. If you remember, Three Arrows Capital was the embattled and now bankrupt investment company. In the hedge fund, that's the word I was looking for, the hedge fund here in the cryptocurrency space. They went belly up for a variety of reasons that we don't have time to get into today. But essentially, there was quite a bit of lending going on from Genesis towards Three Arrows Capital, and we're going to read more about that in a moment. Here's what happened. We are learning more by the day, but at the present, the basic events as we understand them are as follows. Genesis lent $2.36 billion of assets to Three Arrows Capital, a Singapore-based hedge fund that went belly up in June 2022. After collateral was liquidated, Genesis indicated that it was left with a loss of at least $1.2 billion. Stop. The point of collateral is to be able to wholly cover the loan and more so that you not only make back the principal, but you also make back some of the interest if you are the lender. The fact that they had that they took a loss of $1.2 billion after they liquidated the collateral that they were holding from Three Arrows Capital means that the collateralized loan was massively under collateralized and that there was a stupid amount of how shall I say this in a more polite way? There was very dumb accounting going on there and very poor loan risk management taking place at that time, or else Genesis would not have lost $1.2 billion. At this point, Barry Silbert had two legitimate options: restructure the Genesis loan book inside or outside a bankruptcy court, or fill the $1.2 billion hole with DCG's funds that it could have gotten from Grayscale or it could have gotten from CoinDesk or wherever. He did neither. At that point in time, the Genesis loan book was approximately $8 billion, which means that a $1.2 billion loss from 3AC would have accounted for roughly 15% of the loan book's assets. A restructuring then could have addressed this shortfall to achieve a full recovery of assets for all lenders, including earned users, that being Gemini's loan, where they are holding $900 million of Gemini's money, in a short amount of time and given them direct access to liquidity. But Barry chose not to do this. He also chose not to fill the $1.2 billion hole. Instead, he pretended to. And pretend he did. Beginning in early July 2022, Barry, DCG, and Genesis embarked on a carefully crafted campaign of lies to make Gemini, earned users, and other lenders believe that DCG had injected $1.2 billion of actual support into Genesis. Public lies. On July 6th, Michael Morrow, then CEO of Genesis, tweeted, "DCG has assumed certain liabilities of Genesis related to 3AC to ensure we have the capital to operate and scale our business for the long term." This statement was false and misleading. In reality, DCG had not ensured that Genesis had the capital to operate. In fact, DCG hadn't given Genesis so much of a penny of actual funding to make up for the 3AC losses. Instead, DCG entered into a 10-year, that's the part that we didn't know before, entered into a 10-year promissory note with Genesis at an interest rate of 1%, due in 2032. This note was a complete gimmick that did nothing to improve Genesis's immediate liquidity position or make its balance sheet solvent. More on this later. And even though DCG was tagged in Morrow's tweet, no one from DCG, including Barry, bothered to correct his misstatement, probably because that was the intention in the first place. So essentially, and there's 3 more pages to go here. Essentially, DCG said, we're going to fill the hole of $1.2 billion, but we're going to do it over the course of 10 years. The problem is the hole that Genesis was in was that day. They needed $1.2 billion yesterday to fill that hole, and they did not have it. This is a really big deal. By the way, you might want to watch this stream twice, because even just me reading it back after I've already read it once is giving me more to chew on, because I already know what's going to happen at the end. It's kind of if you watch a movie twice, you start noticing other things. This is a really detailed and technical article, open letter, so I would encourage you to watch this twice. I normally wouldn't say that, but I think it would actually be helpful for you in this case. Private lies. Behind the scenes, multiple Genesis and DCG, looks like that's a typo, DCG personnel began doubling down with more lies. For example, on the same day as Morrow's tweet, July 6th, Matthew Balenswang, Genesis then head of trading and lending, emailed a document titled 3 Arrows Postmortem to multiple Gemini employees who are responsible for managing aspects of the EARN program. The section of this document, labeled Key Facts, stated, losses predominantly absorbed by and netted against DCG balance sheet, leaving Genesis with adequate capitalization to continue business as usual. Of course, that's not the case, because DCG allegedly had given them $1.1 billion over the course of 10 years. Remember, DCG is only 7 years old itself. This statement was false and misleading. In fact, DCG had not absorbed the 3AC losses on its balance sheet. Doing so would have required DCG to inject real-time support into Genesis, and the DCG promissory note did not do that. As I'll explain below, leave Genesis with adequate capitalization on its balance sheet to continue business as usual. Accounting fraud. This lie was perpetuated by a document titled Gemini Risk Metric Request that Balenswang attached to the same email correspondence with Gemini employees. The financial position per asset section of this document contained what we have since discovered to be at least 2 critical misrepresentations. 1, it characterized the DCG promissory note as a current asset with a subcategory labeled Other Assets, and 2, it valued it at $1.1 billion. I'm just going to skip the next two paragraphs here because I'm going to try and speed through this. I'll just summarize them. First of all, you can't categorize a 10-year promissory note as a current asset because you don't currently have it. Number two, it is not valued at $1.1 billion because nobody values a $1.1 billion loan over the course of 10 years, promissory note over the course of 10 years at $1.1 billion. You value it much, much lower because the person that is promising the note could go out of business, and also you don't have that money right now. Moving on, I'll just skip these two so that you get to the point of that. The improper accounting in the Gemini risk metric request document also existed in the Genesis balance sheet as of June 30th, 2022 that Balance Swing included in the same July 6th email. These misrepresentations were a sleight of hand designed to make it appear as if Genesis was solvent and able to meet its obligations to lenders without DCG actually committing to the financial support necessary to make this true. DCG wanted to have its cake and eat it too, and Barry and DCG might have gotten away with it, if not for those meddling kids, one of them named Sam Bankman-Fried. How did we get here? Agreed. As a standalone business, it's inconceivable that Genesis would have lent so much money to 3AC given, and this is where it gets wild, by the way. Like all of this so far is just classic fraud. It happens, it's sad, and something needs to be done about it. But it's just fraud. It's people trying to cover their tracks with fraud. Now it gets nuts. Greed. As a standalone business, it's inconceivable that Genesis would have lent so much money to 3AC given the low quality of the collateral that 3AC posted. You remember what I said a second ago. The low quality of the collateral is obvious because they had a $1.2 billion hole after they liquidated the collateral. After collateral was liquidated. You can see it right here. They still were out $1.2 billion, meaning that they were massively under collateralized. When was the last time that you had money on a lending platform? And first of all, when was the last time anybody had money on a lending platform in the first place? But also, when was the last time you had money on a lending platform and they let you go belly up, where you owed $10,000, but you only had $6,000, $7,000 of collateral? No, they don't do that. Why was Genesis doing that to 3AC? That's a big question that we're going to find the answer to. Genesis made these loans because it was one piece of a much larger scheme designed to enrich the greater DCG enterprise. More specifically, Genesis was willing to recklessly lend to 3AC because 3AC was using the money for kamikaze grayscale net asset value trade, a recursive trade that ballooned the asset under management of the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, ticker GBTC, and as a consequence, the fees earned by its sponsor, Grayscale Investments LLC, Grayscale, a wholly owned subsidiary of DCG. Wow. Genesis booked these interactions with 3AC as bona fide collateralized loans. It is becoming clear, however, that this was not the case at all. In reality, 3AC was acting as a mere conduit for Genesis, allowing it to enter into what were effectively swap transactions of BTC for GBTC shares with the Grayscale Trust. In this transaction, Genesis was betting that shares would be worth more than Bitcoin in the future. That's obviously not true. You know that GBTC is trading almost 40% lower than Bitcoin right now. The 3AC loan was the Bitcoin leg of the swap, and the 3AC collateral was the GBTC leg of the swap. Ouch. 3AC was a mule shuttling the assets between the parties, and as a result, Genesis ended up owning massive risk. Up until 2021, Genesis won this zero-sum trade because the GBT shares were worth more than Bitcoin. Starting in 2021, however, Genesis lost this trade because the shares were worth less than Bitcoin. Normally, all things being equal, the gains and losses would cancel each other out. There is no free lunch. In other words, Genesis would participate in both the wins and losses. Astonishingly, however, it appears that Genesis never participated in the wins because it apparently always ceded them, the GBTC share premium, to 3AC. This reminds me a lot of the kimchi premium. If you remember back to 2016-17, many people would buy Bitcoin in the United States or whatever exchange, then they would go sell it in a South Korean exchange for 1 or 2% more, take the money, buy Bitcoin, take it back to the South Korean exchange, sell it, and then they make 1 or 2% every time they did that loop. And it was called the kimchi premium, and it was closed when South Korea made it so that you had to have a Korean social security number to trade on their platform, on any national cryptocurrency exchanges based in their nation. But this reminds me of this a lot. People trading arbitrage. Basically, this is an arbitrage trade that was being done illegitimately, fraudulently, to the tune of billions of dollars. How deep does the rabbit hole go, man? Goodness gracious. All right. Astonishingly, however, it appears that Genesis never participated in the wins because it apparently always ceded them, the GBTC share premium, to 3AC. Which is funny because they were giving all the gains to 3AC and 3AC still went bankrupt, and the surviving party, Genesis, had nothing but losses. So everybody lost this. It's pretty sad. Also unsurprising. This meant that Genesis only participated in the losses, turning what would otherwise been a zero-sum trade into a negative-sum trade. Crazy town. Disturbingly, not only did Genesis not close out 3AC's positions when the NAV trade inverted, something any rational, independently operated business would have done, absolutely. It continued to lend to 3AC on attractive terms and accept GBTC as collateral. For Grayscale, this had the desired effect of keeping GBTC shares from being sold into the market, which would have depressed the share price and further widened the discount of the NAV. But for Genesis, this had the undesired effect of keeping the risk position open and allowing it to grow. So back up. That's a big allegation. For Grayscale, this had the desired effect of keeping GBTC shares from being sold onto the market. Remember, DCG owns Gemini. They don't own Gemini. They have a lot of money that Gemini wants back. They own Genesis and they own Grayscale. We have 3 different companies and they all start with G. And we have Barry Silbert and DCG. Grayscale is running at a pretty big discount right now compared to the actual price of Bitcoin. If Barry Silbert's DCG and their Grayscale could keep a huge amount of Grayscale's Bitcoin trust inside of Genesis, so that they were not able to be traded, that would hugely shock the supply, while allowing for what supply is left to drive the price of Grayscale's Bitcoin trust higher, driving more investment to it, and essentially operating the genesis of an insider trading ring. Not exactly insider trading, but market manipulation is the word I'm looking for, not insider trading. The problem with that is that they got caught with their pants down, because essentially they were DCG was enriching one of their companies at the expense of the other, and Gemini was on the Genesis was on the receiving end of holding all the money, and Grayscale was the one that was supposed to be profiting. They were essentially hoping that the premium that Grayscale would be running would be attractive enough to encourage a ton of investment, while the losses that Genesis was taking would be able to be filled by the profits generated by Grayscale having increased attractiveness, because the amount of supply that Grayscale put on the market was eaten up by Genesis, and so more people would invest in Grayscale and bring more money to the party, and 3AC was, as Cameron Winklevoss called it, the mule that was allowing this to happen. Wow. Anyone with money in Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, you already know it's at a discount. It's surprising that it's at that much of a discount when they were intentionally manipulating the price, allegedly, according to Cameron Winklevoss, to try and keep the price higher, and it's still trading at a massive discount. Don't forget, Grayscale holds a couple 100,000 Bitcoin. All right, why would Genesis enter into a toxic risk position where the best it could do was not lose money? Things only begin to make sense when you realize that the Bitcoin this swap was stuffing into the Grayscale trust like a Thanksgiving turkey is stuck there forever. It can never be redeemed, or at least until Grayscale, in its sole discretion, decides to implement a redemption program allowing GBTC shares to be converted back into Bitcoin, which they have not done yet, which means that if you put Bitcoin in Grayscale, they hold on to it forever. As a result, Barry was comfortable with Genesis loading up more and more on this toxic trade because it was a gambit to feed the Grayscale Trust, Barry's financial Hotel California that would print money for the DCG universe in perpetuity. The end would justify the means, and that's what I'm saying. You hurt Genesis and therefore Gemini and the people that Genesis had loaned money to for the sake of making Grayscale richer, for the sake of making DCG richer, for the sake of making Barry Silbert richer. Original accounting fraud. Instead of booking these swaps as the risky derivatives that they were, Genesis hid them by mischaracterizing the first and last legs of these swap transactions as collateralized loans on its balance sheet. This made the Genesis balance sheet appear healthier than it actually was, fraudulently inducing lenders to continue making loans. In June 2022, the music stopped. 3AC collapsed, lying bare the poisonous fruits of this radioactive trade. Instead of stepping up to solve this self-created problem, and despite having earned more than $1 billion in fees, all at the expense of Genesis lenders, Barry refused to take responsibility. Instead, he resorted to committing fraud to protect his ill-gotten gains. The path forward. For all the reasons mentioned above, there is no path forward as long as Barry Silbert remains CEO of DCG. He has proven himself to be unfit to run DCG and unwilling and unable to find a resolution with creditors that is both fair and reasonable. As a result, Gemini, acting on behalf of 340,000 earned users, requests that the board remove Barry Silbert as CEO effective immediately and install a new CEO who will right the wrongs that occurred under Barry's watch. Genesis lenders, including earned users, have been seriously harmed and deserve a resolution for the recovery of their assets. I am confident that with the new management at DCG, we can all work together to achieve a positive out of court, hint, 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 solution that will provide a win-win outcome for all, including DCG shareholders. Sincerely, Cameron Winklevoss. Just blew up everybody's headphones. You just gotta. Yeah, you see why I said declares war on Barry Silbert? I'm not joking. I mean, he literally just said, hey, you lose your job or we're going to court. That's basically what he said. And fair enough, dude. I think Cameron Winklevoss actually went pretty easy on him, to be honest, because it really does look like, based on what he said, that DCG was intentionally propping up a ring of trades that was causing Grayscale to make millions and hundreds of millions of dollars at the expense of the financial stability of Genesis, this other company, which was affecting people at Gemini and other lenders. 3AC going belly up. We're still feeling the contagion from it. But now you might be wondering, how does FTX play into this? Well, it's also come to light that Genesis held $175 million on FTX. Right. The other problem is that Grayscale, let me see if I can find this really quickly. The other problem is that Grayscale is trading at a very large discount to what Bitcoin is trading at. And that's a big problem because Grayscale is effectively losing a lot of its valuation, and they're losing money, and they simply can't keep up. Every single part of DCG's entire company is bleeding, and they know it, and they're the ones that did it because they didn't build it right. This is what I've been talking about, guys, and this is why I know Bitcoin being down 75% hurts. The problem is, Bitcoin is an incredible piece of technology. So too is Ethereum. I think they are wonderful technology. I think that Bitcoin is one of the greatest store of value assets that we have ever seen in the history of mankind. I also think that Ethereum is one of the greatest pieces of software that has been created since the internet itself. That being said, other than those two and a few other cryptocurrency assets, the majority of this market is built on ideology, hype, and get-rich-quick schemes. This is an example. This does not, at this point, DCG, does not seem to be a company that is run in a way that is conducive towards longevity, proper business practices. It seems that it's a company that has grown very quickly, and part of the way it's grown very quickly is by shading accounting practices. Sounds familiar. Now the question is DCG going to go belly up? Because let me just check here. Let's just see how much Bitcoin Grayscale owns. Right, here we go. So the largest Bitcoin ETF is Grayscale Bitcoin Trust GBTC, which owns 654,600 BTC, or nearly 3.2% of the total supply. In total, ETFs, public and private companies, own almost 1.5 million BTC, more than 7% of the total supply. That is incredible. That is absolutely wild. The problem is, if something does happen to GBTC, if something does happen to DCG, if something does happen to Genesis and they do go bankrupt, what happens when the bankruptcy courts drop 650,000 Bitcoin on the market in the span of a year to 2 years and provide a ridiculous amount of sell pressure? That causes a huge price in the crash twice. First, it causes a crash in the price because DCG is arguably a much bigger and more powerful company than FTX was. We're talking about something half an order of magnitude larger than FTX. Then, not just does the FUD of that cause a crash in Bitcoin, then the reality sets in that you've gutted a huge part of the investment architecture of Bitcoin, where a ton of people buy Bitcoin through GBTC. You just saw 3.2% of the total supply is in that trust, in that ETF. And all that Bitcoin ends up getting liquidated to cover the fallout of the empire. And then also the other thing is, since Cameron Winklevoss accused DCG and Genesis of being commingled, that also has to bring into question, is CoinDesk commingled with DCG? I wonder. I don't know. That's the question that we have to wonder ourselves. Would CoinDesk go under? If so, what does that do to the media environment in cryptocurrency? This is a big story. This is a really, really big deal. And very simply, if this does go to court and everything Cameron Winklevoss said is true, there will be criminal charges, and there should be criminal charges pressed against Barry Silbert and against probably a few other personnel at DCG. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly who. The fact is, this is another potential fraud of epic proportions. And Gemini Earn Program, the Gemini Earn Program, or Genesis, or Grayscale, or CoinDesk, or DCG at large could go bankrupt as a result of this because they're still hemorrhaging money from the FTX cataclysm. It's surprising to me that Bitcoin has still managed to maintain a rally over the last several days despite all of this. Let's go ahead and read some chat. See what you guys are doing. Jebby, said Anthony. What's up? Thank you everyone for joining the stream, by the way. Make sure you smash that like button if you haven't already. Let's see if we can get to about 300 likes here in the next 5 minutes. We got 500 people watching. Thank you guys so very much. Instead of coffee and crypto, it's Gatorade and Ada. Super dad joke. There you go. Gatorade and Ada. Gatorade. We are not sponsored by Gatorade, but we are in the hometown of Gatorade. So I guess in a way, we're sponsoring Gatorade itself with property taxes. We shall see. Slap of the like mon, said CBD Suddy. Indeed, smash that like button. Thank you guys. The controllers are trying to crash the crypto market. Who are the controllers if not DCG? I don't know if DCG would be trying to crash the crypto market because they stand to lose literally billions, if not tens of billions of dollars from that. I mean, just take a look at this. Look at this right now. Digital Currency Group, you can see right here on the right, as of September 2021, had $50 billion in assets under management. That's not even including Grayscale. That's not even including everything else because Grayscale is the one that's holding pretty much all of that. That's not even including Genesis. In 2021, the company was said to manage more than $50 billion in assets. You get 654,000 Bitcoin. It's probably more than that by now. How much is that? How much money is that? What is that? $12 billion? 100,000 million billion. That's $11.5 billion worth of crypto. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's all short-term FUD as long as you actually hold your crypto in private custody. I agree, but in this case, short-term could be a couple of years rather than a couple of months because this is a really big deal. Where have you been, bro? I've been right here. Hello. Tall blonde girl said, we love Jebb. Hi. Queen said, Bedrock present. What's up, Queen? If you guys don't know, Queen is referring to an analogy I made at one point, and that is that the winds and the waves will come and they'll wash everything away, but those who remain, you are the bedrock. Welcome, Bedrock, to the Crypto Jebb YouTube channel. You would think if it were going to steal money, you'd know how to count. That's the part, though. They did know how to count. They intentionally didn't count it correctly is what seems to have taken place. It's almost like that $1 billion loan that Sam Bankman-Fried loaned to himself and then authorized himself. It's kind of like that. The contagion is continuing to impact crypto. Is the bottom in or not? I think not, in my honest opinion. It entirely depends on whether or not we have another major bankruptcy like DCG or Grayscale or Genesis. The problem is Grayscale running at a deficit at a discount on its trust means that they are, in theory anyway, already and technically insolvent, and they don't have a 1-to-1 asset ratio. So you're saying they're money laundering crooks. I'm not saying that. Cameron Winklevoss seems to be saying that, but I'm not going to put words in anybody's mouth. That's crazy how much rain y'all getting out there, praying no major damages to the factory. There you go. The Class Guy T Guy, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Grayscam was always a scam. Dump it. We want cheaper BTC and alts. I was just outside with my dog and we're getting a warm up. A tree thing, snow falling off the trees. Hit my dog, now I won't go outside and he just keeps looking out the window at the trees. Oh, poor guy. Foundry also manages a large BTC mining pool. Yep. Why everyone thinks we bull market, people tend to forget. Good morning, crypto fam. Sorry I'm late. What's up, Silent? Let's see. All right. All right, guys. Think we caught up on chat. Let's go ahead and jump into a little bit of breakdown of Bitcoin. And towards the end, we're going to talk a little bit about the geopolitical landscape on a few things. We're looking at Bitcoin right now. It's currently trading at 17,285. As you know, yesterday we talked about how Bitcoin would likely be going into this ascending triangle pattern right here. And from there, Bitcoin would have a price target sitting up just over $18,000. You can see that level right up here, just about $18,000. The question is whether or not Bitcoin can actually break bullish above this region. There's a couple of things giving that idea a little bit of credence and also a little bit of concern. First thing for the credence side of things is that there is a strong buy signal in play right now. That strong buy signal has been confirmed. It's also the first strong buy signal that's been confirmed ever since this one back here in November of 2022, November 28th, 2022. These three buy signals were invalid because they were just pointing back to this one. This is the actual buy signal you would have gone with. Before that, the last confirmed buy signal was all the way back over here. So if you weed out all the false, I'm sorry, there's also a strong buy signal right here, but for a variety of reasons, you wouldn't have really used this one. So we'll just weed that one out. This is really these are really the last two confirmed buy signals that we've seen. Just weeding out everything. So if you don't know, Lux Algo, wonderful technical indicator, but of course every technical indicator needs a human eye on it. One of the things that we do with Lux Algo is we weed out signals that are not confirmed for a multitude of reasons, and I would argue that every single signal except for these five can be completely and totally weeded out over the last, 3 months. Meaning that we've basically seen 5 signals, and they are very, very important signals because every single one of them has led to the market moving in exactly the direction they predicted. This signal was confirmed by Trendcatcher right here. It was invalidated and rejected here after a 7.5% rally to the upside. This was less than 24 hours before the FTX catastrophe. Lux Algo predicted a downtrend. Worked out very well. Moved the market down 21% till the next confirmed buy signal. Then we saw the buy signal rally at 7.9% to the next sell signal. Sell signal dropped us to where we confirmed a buy signal, 5.12%. Now we're in a strong buy signal. As you can see from the historicity here, there is a likelihood that we could see a pretty large movement in response to this buy signal, maybe even 6, 7, 8%, which would potentially put us back up to around $18,000 as a result. Anybody wondering, is anybody wondering why... If anybody is wondering why I'm weeding out the rest of these signals, I'll give you a brief reason, a brief explanation. Essentially, we used the trend catcher, which is this line right here, to ascertain whether or not we've seen a valid buy signal or sell signal. For example, starting back over here, we saw a sell signal. Trend catcher did not turn red, which means that this sell signal was invalid, which means that the following buy signal was actually just a repeat of this signal, meaning that we can safely ignore it. Same thing here. This sell signal was not followed by red trend catcher. Instead, it was followed by buy signal. That's the same thing repeating here, so we can safely ignore it, which means that we can ignore all 4 of these signals until we get to the signal that gives us the red trend catcher. Down here, let's skip forward a little bit. All of these signals right here are the exact same thing. They are invalid and or pointing back towards the previous signal because trend catcher did not change at all after this signal and after this signal. On this front, however, we probably wouldn't have used this buy signal very much because trend catcher barely jumped a little bit. And also because we wanted to let the market calm down a little bit before we went and bought a bunch of coin. Now, you may have bought some coin here for a long-term investment. We did that as well. But if you were trading, you probably wouldn't have used this buy signal for trading just because of the high volatility, which means that this would have been a more tempting signal to use and buy from because there was green trend catcher, but I probably would have weeded it out for a variety of factors, mainly just because the market was so volatile and the near-term future was so uncertain. As for right now, however, we do have good reason to believe that Bitcoin has the potential to go through a rally. The hard thing is that there is so much FUD sitting in the market in the form of Gemini going, its Gemini earn program going down, DCG, and everything going on between those several companies. We don't know whether the FUD is going to cause a crash in the price of Bitcoin or if the pent-up bullish pressure will cause a rally in the price of Bitcoin. We really just aren't sure. Bitcoin is pushing into this territory right here of the reversal zone. The question now becomes, can we consolidate here for the next couple of days and then push through that reversal zone in the next couple of days? Remember also, CPI data is dropping on the 12th at 8:30 a.m. I will be making a video as soon as I possibly can about that data. I'm hoping to release that video before 9 a.m., but I may have to release it right before the stream. So be watching out for that video on January the 12th before noon. I'll be making a phone video talking about the CPI data drop. It's very, very, very important. But if that data drop is bullish and if people are not freaking out about this DCG debacle, then we will likely see a rally and a break above 17,350. If, however, people are still very concerned about what's going on with Grayscale and DCG, etc., you see the CPI numbers not come out as bullish as we would have liked them to, and just for whatever reason, Bitcoin is not able to break through 17.3, then you likely see a retracement back to 17,000. It's not exactly a bad thing, though, because we'd be falling out of the reversal zone here on Lux Algo, resetting a previous level of resistance as a current level of support, and then we could potentially bounce from there and try and break through 17,350. Moving on towards the end of this week or moving into the beginning of next week. That's what I would be looking for on that front. So as far as the short term is concerned, I think there are two likely scenarios, and both of them are bullish. One of them is just slightly less bullish than the other. I also want to look here at Lux Algo price action concepts. Again, if you guys have not gotten Lux Algo, you definitely should. It's an incredible technical indicator. And we're waiting right now to see if equilibrium is going to jump up here. Essentially, what we're waiting for is to see if the candle coloring is going to, not the candle coloring, but if the candlesticks are going to break through the premium right here, and then we would likely reset the equilibrium to be right here around $17,300. You see the equilibrium is sitting right down here, discounts at 8% likelihood, premiums at 92% likelihood, makes sense. We're sitting right next to the premium. The question now is, can we reset equilibrium to being up here around $17,300? I think that that is very possible. One more thing to keep in mind is that we did see a break of structure right here. That's a bullish sign. We also saw a change of character plus right here, a chalk plus. That's a bullish sign. We also saw equal lows right here, but they were actually trending to the upside ever so slightly. That is also a bullish factor. And just stripping away Lux Algo for just a moment, we can also see there's a green, red, green formation. This almost looks like a rocket ship, and it oftentimes acts like one. Led us to the upside. We had a pullback not anywhere near as far as the rally had taken us, so we managed to push back to the upside, and both of these wicks, even though the second wick is a little bit lower, both of these wicks broke through 17,350. Looking down here on some of our technical indicators on the 4-hourly chart, we can see that RSI is sitting up around 68 to 70. You might think, but Jebb, that means Bitcoin is overextended. We should expect a trend down relatively soon. But that's not exactly how RSI is intended to be read. RSI is not actually intended to mainly be read as an overbought and oversold indicator, although you can get that information from it. It's actually intended to tell you who's stronger. It's the relative strength index, not the relative overbought, oversold index. Sitting at 68 to 70 tells us that the bulls are the ones that are in charge right now, and that makes sense considering we turned this relatively steep uptrending level of resistance into an uptrending level of support. So right now, I'm pretty happy with where the technicals are on Bitcoin, and frankly, I'm also pretty happy that they're not ridiculously bullish. I don't think the technicals are really getting too far away from the fundamentals. There's not a lot going on fundamentally right now, and most of what is going on is FUD. So it would be a little bit strange if Bitcoin were just rocketing to the upside with no technical or fundamental backing. Instead, Bitcoin is slowly but surely attempting to creep up and build recent support so that it can maintain a rally to the upside. And of course, based on what we talked about yesterday, it would make sense for Bitcoin to attempt to go into a rally right now when we have the Dixie so bearish right now. In fact, I will bring up the Dixie and I will show you what I'm talking about. I think I can press Alt-I and invert the Bitcoin chart, and you can see. Actually, let's not invert the Bitcoin chart. Let's, 1 second here. It's Alt-I, I believe. There you go. We go to the Dixie chart. Let's go to Dixie and then add Bitcoin, and we'll be able to see that. Invert Dixie, and then add BTC USD, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You can see over the last, I don't know, let's say the last, let's add it on here in the log sense, not from the price, but the same percentage scale. Looks like the market this is not wanting to cooperate with me. Anyway, the point is, whenever Dixie is very high, Bitcoin is typically much lower. This is inverted at this point, so you can see that's actually Dixie, but this is inverted. So there's typically a correlation between Dixie being relatively low. Again, this is inverted. Relatively low, and Bitcoin being relatively high. You can see that happened back here in 2017. Same thing here during the previous bear market. But whenever the Dixie moves upwards, again, this is an upwards movement, Bitcoin tends to fall. But right now, Bitcoin has stayed sideways and the Dixie has dropped very dramatically. And that essentially tells us that there is more room for Bitcoin right now than there was previously, because Bitcoin, quite simply, is very much inversely correlated to the strength of the dollar. So if the dollar is not as strong, then it's going to make it easier in theory for Bitcoin to move to the upside because its largest competitor isn't quite as powerful. Now, make no mistake, I'm not saying that I think Bitcoin is going to just completely supplant the US dollar and take over global trade and become the world reserve currency in 5 years. I don't think that's realistic. I think if that happens, it'd be at least 30 years, and I think it's a stretch at that. But the point is there is a very strong and causal, as far as we can tell, correlation between the Dixie and Bitcoin. And that's something that we shouldn't ignore. All right. Jebb, isn't it entirely possible that DCG owns a ton of Bitcoin outright, not including customer funds, and is selling their Bitcoin at a loss to cover this situation, therefore making them solvent? It's possible. I would not be surprised at all if that is the case. Jebb, y'all hiring. I think it would be a good I would be a good asset for you and the team. We are looking at relatively soon. I don't know when, because we have all this stuff going on. We need to, that we have a lot of other things that we have to take care of right now, but we are potentially thinking about Jebb, let me help you with your hair, brother. I know. I'm sorry. I know I can do better. I apologize. What we're looking for right now is primarily an editor who would be remote, who is very knowledgeable on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and has a lot of experience. So that's pretty much what we're looking for right now. So if you meet that, then feel free to email us. Let's see. All right. Take another sip of the Gatorade. Need to have it. There we go. It's good stuff. Like I said, we're in the hometown of the Gators, of the Gatorade. Gatorade and Ada. All right, let's back it up a little bit. So, let me see if I can find an article. I believe it's this. There's one article I want to bring to you guys. I just want to make sure I know what to talk about here. I just want to make sure I had the name of the tank correct. Okay, glad I said that. I had the wrong number. I had the right characters, but not the right number. Okay, so you guys know that we are talking quite a lot about the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, and the main reason we're talking about the Russian-Ukrainian conflict is because it is the single largest wrench thrown into human civilization in the last 75 years. Ever since the end of the Second World War. We're talking more important to geopolitics than the Cuban Missile Crisis. We're talking more important to geopolitics than 9/11 and the following war on terror. More important to geopolitics than the collapse of the Soviet Union. You might think that's an overstatement. I'll tell you why it's not. Russia is going to collapse demographically. They don't have the population to continue running their modern civilization. Their entire ethnicity is dying out after everything that wiped out the male population and the female population, but primarily the male population in the First World War, the Second World War, and the different purges of Stalin and the following dictators and leaders of the Soviet Union, and the famines and the mismanagement and the low birth rates. Russia and China both are facing a demographic crisis of apocalyptic proportions where their populations could shrink by 30% in 30 years. People think that that's a joke. People think, oh, people have been saying that for a long time. They have. It takes decades for this to take place. People live a long time. This is, by the way, this is not something that can be disputed. This is a concrete fact. We know what the Russians report as their demography. We also know that they're lying about it. We also know that they have less teenagers and children than they say they do, because it's apparent that they're lying about it. And even if you go by their own numbers, they're going to see a huge amount of people move into retirement and not be very productive to the economy anymore because they can't consume or produce. They're only retired. You certainly can't use them on the battlefield. Russia is backed into a corner, and it is outgunned and outmanned and outnumbered and firepowered by NATO 100-1. Russia realizes that the only way for it to guarantee its survival for another 50 years, and from there, God even knows what happens after that, they're probably still going to cease to exist as a modern state. After that, to get to that point, Russia has to essentially, this is their mind, they essentially have to conquer Ukraine, take Belarus into the fold, Kazakhstan, but that's not as important because nobody lives over there, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, and Yugoslavia, and several other nations to push their borders back to their Soviet borders so that they have more defensible territory. Because right now, Russia has a 2,500-mile-long border that they have no road network to patrol and maintain. They have an army that is obviously a lot smaller and less technologically equipped than it was just 1 year ago, and they have no ability to patrol it. So if anybody wanted to launch a mobilized incursion across Russia, they'd be in Moscow in 7 days, and they know that they couldn't do anything about it, and they couldn't stop it. Russia sees conquering all of Ukraine as the only way to existentially guarantee their survival for more than another 3 decades. Russia realizes that the end of their ethnicity and the end of their status as a world power, let alone a world superpower, is coming. It's coming soon. Putin also realizes this is taking place. He also realizes that this is going to take place after his lifetime. Putin is 66 years old right now. He's not going to live to see this, but he also knows that he will go down in history as the person who either prevented it or caused it. And whether or not Ukraine capitulates to Russia is going to be entirely blamed or credited to him personally. Putin is a very powerful man in his nation. He's pretty much completely purged the system. There is no threat internally to him. Not one that anybody would get behind. Russia, in their mind, has to conquer Ukraine and bring it into the fold, or Russia as a state ceases to have any kind of defensive capabilities, and they completely collapse as a modern civilization in the next 20 to 30 years. And that's probably already going to happen even if they were to win and conquer Ukraine, because the amount of military hardware that they just lost and had absolutely destroyed will take them 15 years to rebuild. And they've also, by the way, gutted their population even more, because current estimates put their military losses at 111,000. I'm not talking wounded, I'm talking dead. That's a horrible, horrible, horrible thing. Every single one of those people are a human being, a living soul. And that's that every whatever number it is that number too many that were lost, and it's on Putin. The fact of the matter is, if you care about preventing a nuclear war, then you care about Ukraine winning this conflict. Because if Russia somehow beats Ukraine, which is looking more and more unlikely, but it's still very possible because Russia still has a lot of people it can throw at Ukraine. If Russia conquers Ukraine, they more than likely go for Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Yugoslavia, and several other nations, all of which, by the way, are NATO allies. If NATO and Russia get into a shooting war, Russia loses, and then they get backed into a corner, and their last possible way to defend themselves is nuclear weapons, and you potentially have a general nuclear exchange. That's a lot more likely than you think it is, so long as Ukraine loses. If Ukraine wins, or even just manages to keep them out of most of their territory, then that's far less likely, because in 5 years, Russia has even less people that it could throw at the front line, even smaller economies that they could use to stage this kind of war. They were never going to have a better opportunity to attack Ukraine than they did in 2022. They don't have the demographics. They don't have the post-Ukrainian war. They don't have the economy. They don't have the exports. They don't have the infrastructure to mount the kind of invasion that they did on Ukraine. Unless they conquer Ukraine, if they conquer Ukraine, then they could try and move forward. If they don't conquer Ukraine, they're relegated to the ash heap of history for at least a century. So that's kind of the backdrop. The reason that's so important to you is because you don't want a nuclear war. You don't want the you want to know what's happening when the entire global supply chain shuts down again, but an order of magnitude more important and more permanent than what happened with the pandemic. Because the pandemic happened, we got used to it. Give it 5 years without something like Russia-Ukraine, and you're able to rebuild things, and things could kind of go back to normal. You don't do that post-Russia-Ukraine, because the entire world is aging. Russia is now going to be viewed as the arch nemesis of every single other nation on planet Earth, except maybe the top brass of China. And by the top brass, I mean the one-man Xi Jinping state. Because the rest of China probably doesn't like Russia all that much, because they are sending them down a hole. This impacts you. Why? Well, Russia is the largest exporter of food, was one of the largest exporters of food byproducts, and the two major forms of energy, natural gas and oil, in the world. They were one of, if not the largest exporter of all of those different commodities in the entire world. Their largest buyer was Europe. Europe is extremely closely tied not only to the United States, but also to the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency market. Europe is suffering bad right now. Luckily, God is blessing Europe and giving them a very balmy winter, which they very much needed. But God knows whether that's going to continue or not for the next 3 months. If it doesn't, things get bad in Europe. So, the White House is starting to realize that if they send more stuff to Ukraine, Russia can't really do anything about it. Why? They don't have anything to do about it. The last thing that Russia really has is a bunch of dudes carrying 100-year-old rifles and 70-year-old ammunition and nuclear weapons. And Russia is very much likely not going to use nuclear weapons unless there's an existential threat to their state knocking on their very front doorstep, because it doesn't do them any good to nuke territory that they're trying to conquer and grow food in. You can't grow food in an irradiated wasteland. They're probably not going to nuke Ukraine. They don't have anything. They have no way to answer the West sending them equipment. So the United States just granted 100 Bradley tanks. It's between 50 and 100. Depends on what reporting you read. But essentially just sent Ukraine 100 Bradley infantry carriers. Some people call them light tanks. They're not tanks. They're armored. They're armored APCs, infantry carriers. They have a 25 millimeter chain gun and 2 TOW missile launchers, which are capable of outranging many of the main battle tanks that Russia's positioning themselves. You've also got France, and this is the article I was pulling up a second ago, sending, I believe it's about a dozen. I don't remember the number. AMX-10 RC tanks. These are very light tanks, and they're actually, I believe they're also able to be used as mobile armored personnel carriers to the front lines. They do have a 105 millimeter cannon and 2 machine guns. These are not the M1A2 Abrams main battle tanks that the United States fields in Iraq and Afghanistan and the different wars that we fought in past. However, the Bradleys and the AMX-10 RCs are very much modern and very much capable of giving Ukraine the kind of mobility that it needs, especially during the winter when there is no soft cover. You can see everything because there's no leaves on the trees. There's nowhere to hide, so you need something armored and something fast to get you into position so that the troops can move where they need to go. Again, remember, you have a vested interest in Ukraine winning this war. Even if you don't know a single Ukrainian, you don't care about the Ukrainians, even if you think us, the United States, sending armor and equipment and HIMARS and javelins over to Ukraine is the biggest money laundering scheme in the history of mankind, which it very well may be, you still want Ukraine to win this battle because you do not want Russia knocking on NATO's doorstep because the guy in charge is just crazy enough to try it. Not to be doom and gloom, but I am here to tell you that for the sake of your investments, for the sake of the stability of the world you live in, you would like Ukraine to win this. And so that is the most recent development on that front. The United States is sending a $2.85 billion support, I think it's $2.85 billion support package of Bradleys over to Ukraine. And by the way, that's not them just signing a check for $2.85 billion. Essentially, that's all the equipment that's being sent to Ukraine is valued at that much. That's essentially how that works. We already have the equipment. We're just sending it over to them. All right, let's go ahead and read some chat. Jebb, I appreciate you coming up and talking about all this. We will see where things stand in a year, the same with Bitcoin. I want you to understand the world order as you know it is coming to an end. I'm not talking about the New World Order or the Illuminati or lizard people. That's not what I mean. But the world order of the United States enforcing globalization and free trade upon the entire planet has ended. You are going to see an incredible shift in the way that trade, finance, economics, relations between nations, and culture are playing out in the next 10 years. You are seeing the demographic collapse of the first world, especially in Germany, especially in Canada, especially in as we know now in China. And 10 to 15 years after that, you're also seeing the demographic collapse of many of the other nations of the world that were just about 10, 15 years behind the United States-led coalition of nations, their bout of industrialization. So we're talking about Eastern Europe. They're about 10 to 15 years behind this. We're talking about Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Estonia, Poland, Eastern Germany, Romania, Yugoslavia, Ukraine. All of those nations are seeing the similar thing going on demographically. They're about 15 to 20 years behind the rest of the world because they were all behind the Iron Curtain and they joined globalization late, but they caught up very quickly. The thing is, people don't age fast. People don't age any faster. Technology does. So they caught up technologically and through urbanization much faster. The aging process obviously takes as much time as it will take no matter where you are. Tom Crown in chat saying, Jebb, hi, back Crypto Jebb, smash likes. Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate that. Make sure to go subscribe to Tom's channel. Make sure to hit that like button. Let's see if we can get to 300 likes before we wrap it out. How come he can say the nation with a C, but I can't? The nation? Nation? China? China. Is that what you're talking about? China. That's how somebody says it. Half you are gonna think that's funny. The other half are gonna say, Jebb, you did not. Bradley is a fighting vehicle. Yes, I know. It is it's an armored fighting vehicle that is able to transport troops across the battlefield in a very quick and armored fashion. All right. I hope you don't talk about chemistry. Well, maybe you ought to. Yeah, we're going to get into our stoichiometry. Saudi Arabia to join BRICS. BRICS is such a dispersed coalition, and every single one of those nations is in so much trouble. It's not even funny. You want to talk about BRICS? I've talked about Russia and China. Let's talk about Brazil. Brazil's soil is sand. They need fertilizer to be able to grow anything. They're a very agrarian economy, and the entire fertilizer industry of the world is about to blow up because Russia was one of the biggest exporters of it. Brazil is about to go through a huge food crisis in the next 18 months unless they find another way to source all of that fertilizer in a very quick fashion. Fallout 76, here we come. No, I would be very... I don't think that we are going to see, a nuclear exchange, but it would be pretty important that... it would be pretty important that they do not win that war. Russia doesn't, that is. How will Bitcoin play into this changing of deglobalization in the world you talk about? Well, I think Bitcoin will stand to benefit a lot of nations that are left behind by this process. I don't think you're going to see the United States adopting Bitcoin anytime soon. Probably never. In fact, I would wager to say almost certainly never is Bitcoin going to be adopted by the United States as their national currency. But there are going to be different nations that get left behind, and a populist uprising forces their sovereign, their state, to adopt Bitcoin because they're tired of their state inflating the heck out of their currency, or they have a populist candidate like the president of El Salvador coming in and enforcing something to that effect. We shall see. Anyway, I got to get going. I really do appreciate all of you guys tuning in. If you did enjoy today's video, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Matt C said, I invested in a Brazilian potash operation. It could be a game changer for them and their need to import it from Russia. That's my point, is that they have to be able to get that potash, that nitrogen, and the... I'm forgetting one of them. I said nitrogen. Anyway, they have to get all three of the major fertilizers, and most of that comes from Russia. Anyway, guys, like I said, that's going to wrap it out for today's video. Make sure to smash that like button if you haven't already. Make sure to sign up for Lux Algo with the link in the description box down below. Before I go, I do just first want to thank each and every single last one of you for watching, as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.